The Galactic Compliance Board met every 3 months to review species classifications, and today's agenda included Item 47B, humanity's provisional status as a Category 4 intelligence. Commander Vrex of the Talkari Enforcement Fleet had been looking forward to this. He'd spent 2 decades climbing the ranks, and nothing said decorated career quite like personally downgrading an upstart species that thought it belonged among the stars. "The evidence is overwhelming," Vrex announced, his tertiary arms spreading wide as he addressed the assembled delegates. "Humans possess no natural weapons. Their technology is derivative. Their lifespans are laughably brief. They lack telepathy, environmental adaptation, or any significant physical advantages. By every objective metric, they should be Category 6 at best. Supervised exploration only." Delegate Shivara of the Melodian Concordat hummed her agreement. "They've been spacefaring for barely 2 centuries. My people were building Dyson arrays when they were still discovering fire." "And yet," interrupted Observer Keln, "because there's always one. They've established colonies in 43 systems and hold trade agreements with 17 major powers. That's unprecedented for a species their age." Vrex's auditory membranes flattened in annoyance. "Luck. Geographic advantage. They emerged in a sparse sector with minimal competition." "Still," Kelm pressed, "perhaps we should motion to downgrade humans, Category 4 to Category 6. Vrex didn't wait for discussion. "All in favor?" The vote was overwhelming. Humanity's privileges in council space would be restricted immediately. No more independent military operations. No more unsupervised exploration. Someone would need to inform their diplomatic corps. Vrex was already imagining their stunned faces. "You're kidding." Ambassador David Foster looked at the enforcement officer who delivered the news with the expression of someone who'd just been told his parking ticket was actually for a spaceship he didn't own. "The decision is final," the officer said, consulting his datapad. "Effective immediately. All human vessels must submit to Compliance Board inspections. All colony expansions require prior authorization and—" "Right, okay, time out." David held up one hand. "Let me get this straight. The same Compliance Board that approved our Category 4 status 2 years ago has now decided we're too primitive to operate without adult supervision? The initial classification was generous. David leaned back in his chair, which was designed for a species 3 times his size and made sitting a kind of full-body workout. "What changed?" Commander Vrex presented compelling evidence that humans lack the fundamental characteristics of an advanced species. "Ah," David nodded slowly. "And this Commander Vrex, he's the same guy who lost 3 enforcement fleets trying to suppress the Borderlands rebellion last year?" The officer's neck ridges flushed violet. "That conflict involved numerous complications." "Right, complications. See, here's my problem." David stood up, which didn't make him particularly imposing but at least saved his spine. "You folks keep treating military effectiveness like it's some kind of genetic trait. Oh, the Talkari are natural warriors. They have 4 arms and redundant organs. But what actually happened in the Borderlands?" The officer said nothing. "I'll tell you what happened. Vrex sent in overwhelming force using the same tactical doctrine his people have used for 3,000 years, and the rebels, who'd spent 2 months studying human military history archives, adapted faster than his commanders could report casualties. They didn't win because they were stronger. They won because they learned. The board's decision is going to be a problem," David finished, "but not for us." The first inspection happened 3 days later. The compliance vessel matched course with the human cargo hauler. Reasonable doubt, just outside the Kepler nexus, and Captain Jennifer Ortiz watched their approach with the kind of calm that comes from genuinely not caring about the outcome. "They're hailing," her communications officer reported. "Put them through." Jennifer took a sip of coffee that had gone cold 2 hours ago and grimaced. "This is Captain Ortiz of the Reasonable Doubt. I assume this is about the new regulations?" The Talkari inspector's image appeared on screen, all 4 arms crossed in a display of authority. "Captain Ortiz, stand by for mandatory inspection under Compliance Code 77 Echo." Sure thing. Fair warning, though. We're hauling agricultural equipment to the Kepler-4 colony. Might take a while to inspect 3,000 metric tons of irrigation pumps. We are prepared for thorough examination. Your funeral. Jennifer killed the channel and turned to her crew. How long until they realize? Her pilot grinned. I give them 20 minutes. It took 17. Captain Ortiz. The inspector reappeared, and his calm authority had developed some cracks. Your manifest lists agricultural equipment, but these containers are filled with components, military-grade power distribution nodes, targeting system processors, armor plating. Sure, for the irrigation pumps. This is military hardware. No, it's irrigation hardware that happens to use the same design principles as military hardware because, and here's the fun part, we don't actually draw a hard line between civilian and military engineering. A good power distribution system works whether you're pumping water or charging weapons. A reliable targeting processor is useful for guiding construction drones or missile systems. We build everything to military spec because it turns out that's just good engineering. The inspector's face went through several colors. This is a violation. Of what? Your inspection mandate covers weapons and restricted technology. These are irrigation pumps. They just happen to be irrigation pumps that could be repurposed into a planetary defense grid in about 6 hours if someone really needed to. But that's hardly our fault. We're simple farmers, Inspector. There was a long pause. You will proceed to Kepler-4, the inspector said finally, but this matter will be reported. I'd be disappointed if it wasn't. Commander Vrex read the inspection reports with growing unease. 7 human vessels intercepted. 7 clean inspections. But every single ship had been carrying cargo that could be rapidly converted into military applications with minimal effort. Food processing equipment that doubled as pharmaceutical manufacturing. Scientific sensors with specifications that matched military-grade scanning arrays. Construction materials that could build either a colony or a fortified base depending on how you assembled them. They're circumventing the restrictions, he told the compliance board at their emergency session. Every human ship is potentially a military asset. But they're not violating any specific regulations, Observer Keln pointed out. Dual-use technology isn't restricted under our current framework. Because no species has ever been so blatant about it, the Melodians don't disguise warships as agricultural vessels. Neither do humans, Keln interrupted. They simply build all their vessels to the same robust standards. Is that not efficient? Vrex wanted to throw something. They're making a mockery of these restrictions. Perhaps, Delegate Shivara said carefully. We should examine why the restrictions aren't working as intended. The restrictions are fine. Humans are the problem, but the reports kept coming. Human trade convoys were now avoiding compliance checkpoints entirely by filing flight plans through technically legal loopholes in Council navigation law. Human colonies were expanding through a process they called organic growth, that somehow never required formal authorization, because each expansion was just individual settlers exercising their freedom of movement. Human diplomatic missions were citing obscure precedents from Council legal archives that most species had forgotten existed. It was like trying to hold water in your hands. Commander, one of his analysts said during their morning briefing, I've been reviewing human information networks. I think I know what's happening. Enlighten me. They're coordinating. Not through official channels, through what they call social media and public forums. Every human who encounters a compliance checkpoint shares their experience. Every successful workaround gets documented and distributed. Every legal loophole gets cataloged and exploited. They're not following orders from a central authority. They're just learning from each other. Constantly. Vrex stared at the analyst. That's not possible. Information dissemination at that scale requires either telepathy or a hive structure. They have something called the Internet. It's faster than telepathy, and more flexible than hive communication, because it's completely voluntary. Humans share information because they want to, not because they're compelled to. Why would they want to? The analyst made a gesture of uncertainty. Their psychology profiles suggest they derive satisfaction from solving collective problems. They call it being helpful or sticking it to the man. I don't fully understand it, but the effect is measurable. Every human ship captain now knows exactly what to say during an inspection. Every human lawyer knows every loophole in our legal code. They've turned compliance into a game and they're winning. Vrex felt something cold settle in his chest. How long until they've cataloged our entire legal framework? Based on current patterns, they already have. David Foster was in his office reviewing reports when the priority message came through. He read it twice, then leaned back and laughed until his sides hurt. His aide poked her head in. "Sir, the compliance board wants to meet with me, privately. Off the record." David wiped his eyes. "Kellen is coming personally. That's unexpected. That's panic." David stood and stretched. "How long until he arrives?" "His ship docked 20 minutes ago. He's waiting in conference room 7. Observer Kellen looked smaller somehow, despite being physically identical to the last time they'd met. He stood when David entered, and his postural tendrils were arranged in what David had learned to recognize as respectful anxiety. "Ambassador Foster, thank you for seeing me on such short notice." "My calendar's pretty clear these days. Funny how that happens when you downgrade someone's diplomatic status." David sat down and gestured for Kellen to do the same. "What can I do for you?" "I need to understand something." Kellen's voice was quiet. "Why aren't you angry?" "About the downgrade?" "Oh, I was angry for about 10 minutes. Then I realized it didn't actually matter." "How can it not matter? Your species has been—" "Let me ask you something," David interrupted. "Why do you think the compliance board exists?" Kellen blinked. "To ensure galactic stability, to maintain order among spacefaring species." "Right. But here's what I've noticed about galactic civilization. You folks have rules for everything. What weapons you can build, where you can explore, how you conduct trade. And most species follow these rules because they've always followed rules like them. Your people spent 1,000,000 years developing complex social hierarchies and bureaucratic systems, because that's how you survived and thrived. Yes, humans didn't do that. We spent most of our history in small, scattered groups fighting over resources. We survived by being flexible, by adapting, by finding new solutions when the old ones stopped working. So when you imposed these restrictions, you thought you were containing us the same way you'd contain any other Category 6 species." David smiled. "But we don't see restrictions. We see puzzles." Kellen's postural tendrils went very still. "You're saying this was intentional?" "No, that would be conspiracy. This is just what happens when you try to limit a species that spent 10,000 years figuring out how to survive in every environment on their planet. We don't fight restrictions directly because that's inefficient. We root around them. We find the gaps. We adapt faster than you can regulate." "The compliance board is terrified," David finished. "Because you're starting to realize that every rule you write, we'll find a way to follow it while completely ignoring its intent. Every inspection protocol you design, we'll optimize our procedures to pass it while carrying whatever we want. Every legal framework you build, we'll study until we understand it better than you do. Not because we're smarter, just because we're more motivated to understand systems that constrain us." Kellen was silent for a long moment. "What do you want?" "That's the funny part. We want exactly what we said we wanted 2 years ago when you granted us Category 4 status. Fair trade. Freedom to explore. Peaceful coexistence. We never wanted to be a problem. You made us one." Commander Vrex assumed that because we're physically weaker and technologically younger, we're not a threat. He made the mistake of thinking power is about size and strength. But humans learned a long time ago that the most dangerous species isn't the one with the biggest teeth. It's the one that figures out how the system works and then uses that knowledge to its advantage. David leaned forward. "We're not going to attack your fleets or invade your colonies. We're going to follow your rules so perfectly that they stop meaning anything. And there's not a damn thing you can do about it without rewriting your entire legal framework. Which would take decades. And by then we'd have analyzed the new framework and found those loopholes too. See the problem?" Kellen made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. "What if we simply removed the restrictions, restored your original status? That would be a good start." And humans would stop doing this? We'd stop being motivated to do it, David corrected. We're not naturally subversive. We're naturally adaptive. Remove the pressure and we'll go back to what we were doing before. Building colonies, conducting trade, occasionally getting into stupid arguments with each other because that's just how we are. But keep pushing us and you'll discover that humans are really, really good at institutional malicious compliance. Kellen stood slowly. I will convey your message to the board. You do that. David walked him to the door, then paused. One more thing. Tell Vrex that if he'd spent less time counting our weaknesses and more time studying our history, he'd have learned something important. What's that? Humans didn't become the dominant species on our planet by being the strongest or the fastest or the most specialized. We did it by being the most persistent. By never, ever giving up. By turning every obstacle into a problem to solve. David's smile was all teeth. And by the time our opponents realized we were dangerous, we'd already figured out how they worked. The Compliance Board met an emergency session and voted unanimously to restore humanity's Category 4 status with full privileges. Commander Vrex submitted his resignation the same day. 2 weeks later, David received a message from Observer Kellen. It contained a single line. How long have you been planning this? David's reply was equally brief. We weren't. We're just playing the game you started, only we read the rulebook. The truth, which David didn't mention, was even simpler. Humans had spent their entire existence as a species learning to thrive in systems designed to limit them. Gravity, weather, predators, scarcity, political structures, economic models. Physical laws themselves were just another set of restrictions to understand, work within, and occasionally exploit. The galaxy had spent millions of years building a vast, complex civilization governed by rules and regulations and established protocols. They'd created a perfect system for maintaining order among species that evolved to respect hierarchy and accept limitations. Then humanity showed up. And humans, as it turned out, were exceptional at exactly one thing: figuring out how systems worked, and then using that knowledge to their advantage. Not through force. Not through rebellion. But through relentless, creative, utterly exhausting adaptation. The galaxy had tried to contain them with restrictions and bureaucracy. It was like trying to contain water with a net. 6 months later, the human colony on Kepler-4 completed its irrigation network. The pumps worked beautifully. They were also rated for military-spec power loads, connected to a sensor grid with targeting-capable resolution, and built on a foundation that could support defensive emplacements if needed. No one officially noticed. But every species in the sector quietly updated their assessment of humanity from young and primitive to young and terrifyingly competent at working within the rules while completely undermining them. The humans called it malicious compliance. The rest of the galaxy called it something else entirely: asymmetric warfare without the warfare part. And the truly terrifying thing, the part that kept Vrex awake during his retirement, that made Kellen check human activity reports twice as often as any other species, was that humanity hadn't planned any of it. They'd simply done what they always did when faced with systems designed to contain them. They'd read the rulebook. Then they'd played the game better than anyone who'd written the rules ever imagined possible.